Public and Private Partnerships Deputy Joe Costello to open.
Thank you very much.
Deputy has 40 minutes.
Thank you very much, Laskin Corla, and I wish to share my time with Deputy Mary Upton and with Deputy Angus O'Snuddy. Agreed. Laskin Corla, I'm delighted to have the opportunity of opening up the debate here on this Labour private member's motion that Dáil Éireann, noting the collapse of 5 public-private partnership agreements in Dublin City, namely St Michael's Estate in Chicor, Dublin 8, O'Devany Gardens and Infirmary Road, Dublin 7, and Dominick Street and Sean McDermott Street, Dublin 1. Noting that a single developer, Michael McNamara and Company, was selected as the preferred bidder for all 5 projects with Dublin City Council, which are estimated at €1 billion. Noting further that the same developer abandoned plans for the regeneration of Finglas Village, Dublin 11 last week. Concerned that the housing lists in Dublin have grown steadily despite the construction boom for the last 15 years. Concerned that Dublin City Council has had to close its affordable housing list, which exceeded 8,000 earlier this year because of its inability to cope with the growing list. Concerned that hundreds of families awaiting new homes and community facilities now have their hopes dashed. And concerned that the public-private partnership mechanism has provided no risk or penalty to the private developer, while the local authority is left to pick up the pieces. Calls on the Minister for the Environment, Heritage and Local Government to take whatever steps are necessary to remove the developer from the 5 projects, to ensure that in future developers are not allowed to walk away from commitments entered into under public-private partnership arrangements without appropriate sanction. To take direct responsibility for funding and delivering the 5 long-awaited social and affordable housing projects, to meet the residents, to reassure them of the Government's commitment and good faith, and finally, this House determines to review the State Authorities' Public-Private Partnership Arrangements Act 2002 with a view to ensuring that the public interest is protected in future public-private partnership agreements. Laskin Corla, the 19th of May was a very bleak day indeed for residents in O'Devany Gardens, Dominick Street Lower and St Michael's Estate. On that day, Dublin City Council announced that the public-private partnership agreements for the regeneration of these estates had effectively collapsed and that there was no plan B to put in place. Unbelievably, Bernard McNamara took to the national airwaves seeking sympathy for his plight, while the residents were left to look on, stunned, devastated and counting the loss, not just of promised new homes, but of the community and social infrastructure that was to help build new communities in these areas. The Labour Party motion tonight provides a formula for the Government to resolve the housing crisis caused by the collapse of the public-private partnership agreements between McNamara and Company and Dublin City Council. It offers the Government, too, a template to move the construction industry away from the saturated private residential market into the social and affordable housing market, which has been starved of resources and largely neglected during the boom years of the Celtic Tiger. It is incredible to think that while each year of the Celtic Tiger, new records were set for the construction of private houses and apartments, culminating in over 90,000 housing units last year, local authority housing lists were worsening and affordable housing demand was going through the roof. As the rich added to their property portfolios, with city pads and holiday homes funded by 100% mortgages at low interest rates and by 100% tax breaks, those who were in dire need of housing were largely forgotten. Social and affordable housing dried up and the waiting lists lengthened. Every year, Dublin City Council conducts an assessment of housing needs. In 2005, the assessment showed that there were 18,582 applications for social housing accommodation in the City Council's administrative area alone. Today, 3 years later, the figures, which have yet to be released, reveal a 13% increase to over 21,000. The assessment of high or urgent housing need increased in the same period from 5,500 to approximately 6,700, an even sharper increase of 22%. Moreover, the demand in the affordable housing sector has spiralled out of control. As fewer couples and families could afford the exorbitant house prices fuelled by speculation and tax breaks, the demand for affordable housing rose dramatically. In April 2008, Dublin City Council had over 8,000 affordable housing applications, with a pitiful small number of units of accommodation coming on stream for the occasional lottery. Dublin City Council couldn't cope with the demand and simply closed its doors to new business, leaving thousands of young couples and young families out in the cold with no hope of purchasing a home of their own, and that remains the situation. The new rental accommodation scheme, RAS, has also ground to a halt. To qualify for RAS, a tenant has to be at least 18 months in receipt of rent supplement. Up to the 26th of February 2008, when I received a reply from the Minister for Social Welfare, the HSE had identified to the local authorities nationally over 30,000 long-term recipients of rent supplement entitled to be transferred into the RAS scheme. But already in 2007, the RAS scheme, the rental accommodation scheme in Dublin City Council, had closed its doors as well to new applicants. Unable to cope with the numbers of applicants, the scheme has also ground to a halt. Now, those of us in this House here who hold regular clinics and who deal with housing issues know that there is a crisis of accommodation in social and affordable housing provision throughout the city and country. The Exchequer surplus of the boom years could have been used to provide shelter for all, but there was no Taoiseach or Minister for Finance or Minister for the Environment with the vision to act effectively. The money was squandered, massaging the already bloated private construction sector, which is now stranded like a beached whale, and the best opportunity in the history of state to clear our social housing lists was missed.